Hi everyone! Today I'm continuing my series on the descriptions of different relationships between different pairings within the MBTI. Last week I talked about ENTP and ISFJ, and today I'm going to talk about ENFJ and INTP. So all about that in the next few minutes. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's dive in. Alright, so I mentioned in the previous video as well that I'm going to address this topic of relationships mainly by focusing on romantic relationships or really close dynamics between these two people. And I'm going to look at cognitive functions primarily and how the interaction between these two types can look like, what are some of the pros and the potential challenges that such a couple can have. So namely, if we look at ENFJ and INTP, I would say that we are talking about a couple that has quite a lot of potential in terms of finding common ground, but nonetheless, due to the TIFE potential triggers, that's also a space or an area we should talk about and take into account. I believe that ENFJs and INTPs can be very attracted to each other because the common ground of having intuition as a parent function, first of all, can help them to have similar but also complementary perspective on a lot of different topics. And the types of conversations that they can engage in can be quite intellectually stimulating for both. I would say that the NI perspective that the ENFJ can bring, together with the NE perspective that the INTP can bring, can be a very nice way for the two to share ideas, share perspectives, have different abstract conversations, but also do it in such a way where they give each other new ideas and new perspectives, which they will both appreciate, because the INTPs might bring a more divergent way of thinking that could complement what the ENFJ already sees and knows and understands. And the ENFJ can bring a bit more of a philosophical, long-term vision over certain topics, which could also be very intellectually stimulating for the INTP. And I think due to this type of dynamic, this can be a really important attraction element between the two types. Also, the fact that they both have FE and TI as an axis means that both of these types are quite similar in the way that they make decisions, at least as a general idea. Like I said in many of my previous videos, I really believe that the more cognitive functions we share, the easier it is to understand each other and communicate with each other. Even if, for example, in this case, one type values FE over TI and the other type values TI over FE. Nonetheless, there is a similar mold there that can help the types better understand how each of them makes decisions and later communicate about that. Now, in terms of the challenges that these two types can have, first of all, I think a more practical challenge can be related to places where they could meet. I find that a lot of INTPs, not only are they quite rare, but since they are quite introverted, they tend to not always be very present in the social sphere. I'm not trying to say that everybody all the time, but there is a certain pattern where maybe it's quite difficult to meet INTPs. They are rare and they are quite introverted and might prefer alone time quite a lot, actually. Also, ENFJs are more likely to be found in spaces, both personally and professionally, where they can have a wider array of interactions with people, more opportunities for networking, for connection, for relationships. And so sometimes the settings where these two types spend time can be very different from each other, and therefore the two types might struggle to get into contact or to have enough opportunities to meet and talk more so that they get to know each other and potentially end up in a romantic relationship. Now, if they do get in a romantic relationship, from a cognitive function perspective, the FE and TI dynamic can actually be one of the bigger challenges there. So, because the ENFJ has FE hero and TI inferior, and the INTP has TI hero and FE inferior, this dynamic, especially in their youth, or especially during times when the inferior function is not very developed, this can be quite triggering. So, the way that the INTP might take a step back to analyze, to define, to logically understand things, can be perceived as very cold by an ENFJ. And lots of ENFJs might be looking for more emotional warmth and connection, and they might perceive that the INTP is a little bit too closed off in their own mental space of analyzing, processing, understanding, and defining things. Like I mentioned, the more an INTP does this, the more triggering it can be for an ENFJ, who might perceive it, especially if they don't know a lot about type or if they're not aware of what is going on, they might perceive that the INTP is not interested or that they are not emotionally available. And maybe this is not the case at all. Maybe the INTP is very interested and very willing to be part of that relationship, but because TI is such an important part of their psyche, they will retract into their own world and create the space of analysis that, whether they want it or not, eventually could come across as really cold and detached. Now, if we look at things from the other way around, when the FE in the ENFJ is very strong, and the ENFJ maybe over-identifies with FE also as a persona, this can also be sometimes quite overwhelming for an INTP. So the desire that ENFJs might have to communicate, to express feelings, to create social harmony, to have many friendships and many relationships can also be quite triggering, overwhelming, exhausting for an INTP, especially from a social perspective, but also cognitively. While I've noticed that both INTPs and ISTPs who have FE inferior tend to be quite attracted romantically to people who have a strong FE. They are attracted to that warmth, they are attracted to that space that these types can create for them. They can also become overwhelmed, especially when the FE is in the dominant position, in the hero function position. So sometimes this can feel, again, like an element of conflict or tension, where the INTP might feel the need to retract even further because the ENFJ's need to communicate and connect and share feelings can be quite overwhelming to them. And for the ENFJ, this can again look like, oh, they're rejecting me, they're not making space for me, they're not emotionally available for me. And I feel like this can be a real challenge that can cause a lot of conflicts within such a pairing. Again, if the two types create understanding and awareness of these differences and allow each other to explore their interests independently, at least the interests that are different from one another, and show respect for the other person's way of thinking and processing and operating, this can be a great way to support this relationship and strengthen it long term. It might take some effort and some time and some discomfort, but it has a lot of potential to support both partners. And similarly, like I mentioned in the video about ENTP and ISFJ, the aspect related to strengthening each other's functions can also be really helpful. So an ENFJ can learn to strengthen and become more aware of their TI with the interaction with the INTP, and vice versa when it comes to FE. So this can mean that the ENFJ can learn to become a bit more analytical, to put more boundaries with people so that they can take a step back and analyze things and not always jump in to help others, to support others, to people please, to create harmony and so on. And an ENFJ can really learn from an INTP to connect more to their truth, to what their real opinions are about things and not just what society or the group might expect from them to say and do. At the same time, the INTP can learn from the ENFJ to enhance their FE by connecting more with people, communicating more openly, becoming more aware of those moments where they might think that what they said is clear enough for someone else, especially when it comes to more emotional type of conversations, but actually that is not clear for others. Maybe the INTP says something very short and concise, which to them is factually accurate, correct, but the other person might not understand the full picture, especially if they are a feeler. And so through the interaction, through the relationship with the ENFJ and the feedback that they receive, INTPs can enhance their communication around the feeling function and learn to create more space for that social harmony. Of course, this will not reverse the two functions in any way. The preferences will still be there, but it is a great opportunity for growth. But the first step, like I said in this video and last week, is to notice the differences. Pause and notice what is really happening. What do we really feel? In what way do we really trigger each other? what are some of the difficult emotions that are causing me to maybe start a conflict with my partner, or run away from conflict with my partner, or do something that hurts the other person. So acknowledging that emotional content is really, really important. And then taking a step further into learning from each other and allowing ourselves to be inspired by someone who's a little bit different. Okay, so these were my thoughts on some of the most important things that an ENFJ and INTP can experience, both positive things, but also aspects that can be improved or that can be challenges in this relationship. Thank you very much again for watching this video. I'm going to continue this series by describing many different other types of relationships within MBTI types. And I also wanted to remind you guys that I am a professional coach with a background in psychology and psychotherapy, and I support individuals in enhancing their level of self-awareness in order to create a life on their own terms. So if that sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the description below. It will take you to my website and you can find out more. Again, thanks a lot for being with me, and see you next time with another video on typology.